everyone. Welcome to this week's Fireside Creators. I am your host, dressed as a pumpkin, Reverend Dr. Sherry Palace. For this week's show, we are discussing the reality, the truth about witches. Please remember to keep all comments and questions related to the show topic and that this is a safe space. Thank you for joining us, and I'm looking forward to all of your comments and questions. If you're on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe. If you're on Facebook, grant StreamYard access so we can see your name when you have a comment or a question. Let's give a shout out to all of our top sponsors, Ruth, Kirsten, Michelle, Ray, and Heidi. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your support. If you would like to consider supporting me, you can go to sherrypalace.com, and there you will find a support tab and literally dozens of ways for as little as $3 a month. Thank you in advance, and thank you for welcoming us into your home and joining this conversation. I appreciate you all. Okay, let's meet our guests and get smarter. Danae Castile was raised in a fundamental evangelical Christianity, a preacher's kid no less, and she spent several years in ministry herself. She now works with people in all stages of deconstruction towards spiritual health and wholeness, whatever that means for them. Please help me welcome Danae back to our chat. Hello, Danae, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I have a private message up here. Oops. Oh. Okay, next we have Kimberly Rukamp. She is a psychic medium, cunning woman, and a crone. She loves history and folklore, especially if it's in the UK. Kim loves everything old and or dead, and she is a passionate reader. Welcome, Kim.
Hi, thank you for having me.
How is everybody doing this Halloween?
Always enjoy Samhain.
Been busy. Now I
know. Hey, David, happy Halloween. And sorry, I just put your instant message up on the screen. Didn't mean to do that. So witches have literally been demonized for thousands of years. And I was thinking before the show how interesting it is to me that if a witch has magical powers, if a woman has magical powers, she was usually murdered. The Bible calls for their immediate death. But yet if a man parts water, sees burning bushes, comes alive in 3 days and beats death, whole religions are founded on them. So I thought that I was thinking of the irony and the hypocrisy of all of that. And especially studying the fear of the magical powers of women. And I'm not excluding men, but this show is based on women because we're going to have a show on the men who couldn't do tonight, all that good stuff later. But anyway, I found it really misogynistic, patriarchal, hypocritical, all of those things, that any power that women have, they're labeled a witch, first of all, and then they're also demonized because of it. Danae, you're a Christian witch, which I didn't even know existed. Talk to me about that.
So this label actually was born to me when I first started going to the Wild Goose, which is where you and I met.
Yeah.
And I was coming up with a talk, and I think I actually did this talk before that at another little festival called Quirky Fest. And I knew that one was going to be very pagan. And I come from the perspective of being a deconstruction coach. And so I was like, how can I kind of merge a workshop from a deconstruction perspective for a very pagan, witchy festival? And then I did the same one at Wild Goose the past 2 years. And it's called An Agnostic, a Christian, and a Witch Walk Into a Bar.
Yes.
And I tell people the start of the talk is, when I say that, you probably picture 3 very different people, even if not on the outside, certainly on the inside with the way they kind of operate in the world. And I said, but what if I just change it a little bit and say an agnostic, a Christian, and a witch walks into a bar? All of a sudden, it's one person who's all 3 things. And I was saying the butt of the joke is me. Because I realized years ago that one, I don't really love or need labels, but sometimes they are helpful. Sometimes individual people feel the need for a label for themselves. It gives clarity sometimes. It gives identity sometimes. For me, I've never needed it the same way, but I have loved this label because it helps me talk about whether labels are helpful or not with people. I talk a lot about fluid spirituality and how it's okay that what we need in this season of life is not necessarily what I need in the next season of life. And I'm able to take on what is spiritually healthy for me right now and let go of the things that are no longer are needed. And I talk a lot about eclectic spirituality, which, I term as basically the idea that it's okay if I'm not just a Christian, I fall just into the Christian box. And it's okay if I'm not just agnostic and fall into that box. Like, I don't need to worry about other people's boxes. I can just be whatever I am, and that's okay. And so I talk about how, from an agnostic perspective, the idea of just, I have a lot of, I don't know. And I grew up in a section of Christianity, very fundamental, where we had to have all the answers. We had to be about everything. And I kind of thrived in that environment, being someone who loves knowledge, and I love having answers. I love feeling competent with knowledge. And so to pull me away from that, I mean, it's been definitely been a journey to come to a place where I'm very comfortable with the in between, with the unknown, with questions I still haven't answered. I'm okay with that. That was a journey because I imagine I could have been that way, 20 years ago.
Well, and I look at what the research I have done. I mean, I met my first Wicca before I met my first Jew. In growing up and stuff like that. But they have always been very earthy.
Yes.
And I think our emancipation from nature caused a lot of problems, and that we no longer love our planet. We no longer resonate with nature. We just disregard it and say, but God.
That's so,
I'm sorry.
That was kind of when I, as a Christian, the Christian part of me, I don't usually refer to myself as a Christian anymore, but the Christian part of me, that label is, I do still believe in God. And I still have this relationship of sorts with Jesus. It's very different from how it was when I was in evangelical Christianity, but it's what works for me. And whether it works for other people or not, I'm not bothered by that. My partner's atheist, totally great with that, as long as he's happy and healthy and whole.
Any path that leads you to love and being a better person, I am all for.
And this has just been my experience and what works for me still. And so I still believe in God. I still have this relationship. It's just very different from when I was in, Christianity more formally. And then, the witch part for me is more about sovereignty. The fact that, I'm not Wicca, me personally. I'm mostly a solitary practitioner, mostly an eclectic witch. And I love the sovereignty and the autonomy of, I get to decide what is right for me. I get to listen to my intuition, my inner wisdom, and pursue that. And I have guides and, the energy that surrounds me and the connections with earth and people and source and myself that help me along that way. But I have the sovereignty to decide what is right for me and what is best for me spiritually and otherwise.
Maybe that's a definition right there, women's sovereignty.
Yeah. I think that the other piece of that to me is what you said, it's nature. And I think also that most, not all, but to me, what I have really appreciated about most witches I have come across is that they're not afraid to embrace darkness. And so much of religion is really focused on like the light and transcendence and ascendance and towards God. And the witch path is not afraid of going down deep, going into like what we call the underworld, the darkness, the dark nights of the soul, and doing it even, sometimes it just happens to us, right? Where we have those dark periods, but we're also not afraid to go there on purpose. We're not afraid of the dark sides of ourselves, the shadow of ourselves.
I was going to say the shadow work. Yeah.
Yeah. The shadow work. And we recognize that soul and that's important and that there's beauty in both. And I think that you're talking about how females who had any kind of presence spiritually or magically or whatever were demonized. I think that darkness has been demonized. I think that nature has been forgotten and or demonized, and women along. And I think that you kind of take all this, like kind of this half of every experience in the universe, masculine, feminine, and, the physical world and the spiritual world, and light, dark, and you separate it and you take half of it and say, this is wrong and bad, we're missing half of ourselves when we do that. And so I found the other half when I kind of embarked this path. So
fantastic. That's beautiful. Kimberly, tell me all about being a witch. You do this full time, right?
Yes.
Okay. Not that Danae doesn't do it full time, but I mean, your backstory, all of that just fascinated me, and I wanted to share a different side to this. So,
yeah, for sure. Sorry, it's kind of I don't know.
It's a big subject. I get that.
It's like, I don't know. It is kind of just part of your identity to an extent. So it's kind of like, no matter what you do as like a job, the craft in it is part of, it's the ritual, really. But anyway,
like a religion would be with people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, so I guess, you could say I've been like, I don't know, practicing witch, maybe, I don't know, it seems like forever, going on like 10 years, I think, like active study.
Okay.
My sister actually started it first before me, because I was trying to be cool and not be all up in her stuff, like, oh, that's your thing, I got my thing. But and she just kept like, drilling it into me, like, hey, this really helped me, it helped her work through her traumas and things. And she was like, I think this is for you. Well, at the same time, I developed like a love of plants. I became a plant lady. I grew a garden. I'm pretty good. I got a pretty good green thumb. And she was just like, that's green magic, like you're doing it too. And I was like, oh, so I don't have to be some sort of high priestess in a cloak, high Sabbath kind of thing.
The outfit isn't required.
She's like, no, just do your own thing, So that's, and I'm a reader. I love to take in information. And like Danae said, I don't believe that like you stop learning ever.
Yeah.
Like part of life is just knowing you're always a student, no matter what station in life. So I've always just had that in me. And I think with witchcraft, it just fed my curiosity. I could try things out. I could experiment with them. I could put together my own rituals. I dove deep into meditation. I'm like a meditating girl, like 20 minutes a day, and I was deep in that, doing the tarot, book of shadows, blah, 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 all that. And that had been going on for a few years. And then I kind of felt stuck, like spiritually, like they, you talk about, you kind of, move through, shed your skins, like you're just moving through another level. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of blocked. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go see a medium. I was like, I need to talk to my grandmother who did this stuff as well. And I was like, I need some guidance here that the cards are just not giving me. And so I went and saw one, and she was like, you can do this too. Like, I don't know why you're here. And I was like, okay. Yeah. I used to see like fairies when I was a kid. Like, I just thought they were like, my imaginary friends. Maybe they were fairies or something, because I live next to a big like open field. And she was like, of course they were. And I was like, okay, sure, fine. But she was like, hey, yeah, I'm teaching a mediumship development class like next week. I mean, talk about synchronicities, serendipity, all of that. And she's like, you should come on. And I was like, bet, like, again, something new for me to learn. So I was very much gold star student, went like 3 times a week, asking all the questions. Like, I was so like, because I felt like, oh, that weird little kid who was just kind of sensitive and could kind of pick up those things, like she was onto something. It just wasn't the right time, wasn't right environment,
Yeah.
And so I was under a mentorship of mediumship for almost a year. And then she was like, you can do it now. And I've been offering it as a service now for a few years. So yeah, that's it. And funny that you talk about kind of unpacking things. Like I've actually been deconstructing my own witchcraft practice in real time.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of interesting that this, again, another synchronicity, serendipitous kind of thing happening, you know, when it was like, oh, you know, when my sister reached out and was like, you'd be great on this, like, this is your thing.
Yeah.
So like, wow, very interesting how things converge.
Well, in like this show and all of us sitting down. So the fear, right? The fear has been perpetuated for literally thousands of years. Again, I think it's patriarchal. I think it's religions against religions. I mean, one of the things that I came across with the Bible, I was constantly asking, what the hell do you guys have against incense? It's all over the Old Testament. Do not burn incense. That's of the devil. Now it's sold at 7-Elevens. So let's discuss how or let's contradict the evil nature that comes with being a witch. I personally think that every time I've been called evil, it's been because I have been a mouthy. I have been disrespectful or standing on my own. I have fought the system and therefore been labeled
sovereign. I think that's you were sovereign. You weren't controllable.
Exactly.
And being a woman is not controllable.
That makes me a witch.
And that sovereignty, right? When you say, I have sovereignty to make my own decision or to speak up about this or whatever, to buck the system, whatever that sovereignty leads you to do, you're all of a sudden not controllable by the powers that be. And so the only way they can maintain control over everyone else is to demonize you so everyone else doesn't follow you into their own sovereignty.
Love it. Kim, what do you think?
Yeah, that's definitely for sure. Agree with Danae. But what's interesting too, and this is kind of again what drew me to witchcraft as well, is so I love history, love studying history. That's my whole thing. And just like looking back, I had to know, I'm like, we weren't always relegated to this situation. We weren't always like, there had to be like, because history doesn't go linearly, it doesn't go from A to B.
Yeah.
I'm like, there has to be something here. Because how could these old ways just continue? Like there has to be, I was trying to find the thread. And, pre-church, pre-established church, and I'm saying like the Reformed era, like, witches were, part of the church. There were lots of Christian witches.
Yeah.
And, that was part of like, we don't like Catholicism because they use candles and incense.
Right.
Too much, popery. So it really like when I started looking into like the Reformation time period and into the Enlightenment, that seems to be where the real oppression that we experience as females stems from. So I'm like, I'm going to go the old ways.
Yeah.
Where they would go to the forests or go to these wood groves. And it would be a mix of, the cult of the saints and paganism. There is this kind of, there was more sovereignty for women then than we may realize. So, but that's why I love the past.
Well, that patriarchy is
I think it's super important to recognize that any of these topics are super nuanced and complex.
Yeah.
That there's not just that one answer, right? There's like this thing that happened and this thing that happened. And I think you just brought light to that it's not just like, oh, we were afraid of people's power. That's totally part of it. But there was so much going on that fed into this. And then that led to this, to this, to this, to this. And that's history.
Yep.
And
it's the damned Enlightenment. I hate the Enlightenment period. Sorry.
Yeah, didn't it follow a plague?
I mean, like you can even go back further depending on, I know one thing that something I've studied a lot is like the seasons and why we've gotten away from seasonal living in our modern culture. And the Industrial Revolution being a huge part of that, where all of a sudden we have light bulbs and we have machinery and technology where we no longer have to follow the patterns of day and night the same way. We no longer have to follow the patterns of the seasons the same way. Even the agricultural revolution, thousands of years ago, took us away from living off the land the same way, where all of a sudden we dominated about the land in a way, then because farming is not as easy, quite that easy, but more this idea of us dominating the land rather than receiving from the land.
Well, we
And
went from hunters and gatherers to farmers. We
so there's
animals.
so that spans thousands of years of history, these different things. And you put the Enlightenment in the middle of that. And so, I mean, there's so many different things that have led to, why are we disconnected? Why are we afraid of this? Why has this been demonized? Why is this, there's so many interconnecting pieces from all across history. And in some ways, that's what makes history fun.
Yeah, I love history too, Kim. One of the things that kind of drives me crazy is that tree hugger is a bad, it's negative, right? Mm-hmm. But yet literally trees are where we get our oxygen. So, when we laugh at people who appreciate nature, I want to go hug a tree right now just to say, thank you for giving me air. Would that make me a witch? To the patriarchy, maybe, but no one can say that they truly worship God, if whatever they believe that God formed to be, and then hate their creation. And that's one of the emancipations from nature that we have taken into this totally ego-led, we're supreme and the patriarchy, the man is supreme, God, the whole umbrella bullshit. But that also equals the demise of our planet, the demise of creatures great and small. And by saying, well, she's a witch because she cares about that, I just think that's insane. To truly love our neighbor includes every living life on this planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. A lot of how I practice is like ancestor veneration. So that kind of falls in line with, like hugging a tree and things like that. Mm-hmm. Like we have to, and yes, it's very cool to know what your ancestry is and the like. I'm doing that personally with my family and stuff right now. But if you can't understand that, like, the trees are also your ancestors. Yeah. They have also nourished you, fed you. They are intelligent. There is studies that they do communicate, and like all of that kind of thing. So I think, like hugging a tree is like hugging a member of your family.
Yeah. And
I think like you talk about man dominating nature and commanding it and things like that. We have lost, I believe, the importance of exchange and fairness rather than just reaping and sowing and making off with it.
Yeah.
It's thankfulness, it's gratitude, it's leaving offerings, it's being kind to your trees and your gardens and things. Yeah. We all lived in harmony. I mean, probably fluctuated, but the intention was to live in harmony. People blessed their animals. People named them. People, there were rituals and enchantments and things like that marked the phases of the farm life, of the shearing of the lambs, the milking of the cows. Mm-hmm. There was all this intense beauty and intention with understanding that you give to the land and the land gives back. And I think that's like a major thing we've lost.
Right? I mean, we don't honor our neighbor, let alone our world.
That's honestly what kind of led me into witchcraft. Was I started getting really, like I said, been studying seasonal living for many years, long before I left evangelical Christianity. And I've always been drawn to like kind of celebrating the seasons, celebrating the first day of fall, the first day of winter, the first day, the solstices and equinoxes. I've always been drawn to do that my whole life. I've always enjoyed observing the seasons. And then I got this point where I started really diving in more into seasonal living. What does that look like in our modern world? Why have we diverged so much from seasonal living? Why does it matter for my health and my happiness and my wholeness and that of my world and my neighbor? Why does it matter? The seasonal living. Mm-hmm. And that kind of led me into learning about native peoples who lived seasonally and our ancestors that lived seasonally. Pagans lived so seasonally, like in more of a ritualistic way, obviously time wise, depending on how far you go back, live seasonally because you had to. But even your modern day pagan lives seasonally out of reverence, even if they don't have to in our modern world, right? And so I kind of became drawn through that. And actually, you were talking about how you'd never heard of a Christian witch before. A friend of mine kind of knew I was, I had kind of gotten interested in the seasonal living and kind of this idea of chakras and, just learning more and more about various tribal and native experiences when it comes to spirituality. But I was still very evangelical Christian and not very, but I was still in that world. And so she sent me a link, an invite to a group called the Church Witch. And I was like, okay. And the Church Witch is actually Lauren Wild. She became my teacher and a good friend. And and she doesn't really go by the Church Witch anymore, has kind of shed that title as it has served her. And I think that's great. At first I was like, you can't get rid of that. That's, but I think that's part of it, right? That fluid spirituality, what served me at this time may not serve me.
I was there too. I get that.
Yeah, right. Well, but that was what eased me in, it was like, okay, there's a lot of people here who do seasonal living and venerate and respect and hold gratitude and space for nature and for ancestors. I like that. And then it became like tarot. It's like, And my teacher taught me, she taught that tarot for some people is just a tool for your intuition. It's just a tool to tap into your own intuition. Like you already know what decision you need to make. You're just kind of, turning a blind eye to the decision you need to make. And
the same way people use the Bible for Bible verses, though.
Exactly. And she brings that up all the time, is that it's a tool just like the Bible. And I was like, I could get on with that. And then it was all those little things that kind of pulled me. I was like, oh, I would try that. Oh, well, that makes sense. And one thing I loved about the group I was in with her was that everyone practiced differently. And some people were really into tarot, and some people were into it just as an intuition tool. And some people were into it as kind of channeling and divination and, predictions even. And it was okay if you did one or the other or none. And some people were into numerology. I've never really been as big into numerology. And some people were really into astrology and some people weren't. And again, that autonomy and sovereignty to say that serves me in a good way, that resonates with me. And it might resonate with me right now. And in 6 months, the thing that I could care less about might resonate with me then. And so allowing that, and then also the fact that we were celebrated and cheered on in our autonomy, that no one was going, oh, Danae, that's not how you do it. No one was telling me, you can't do it if you don't believe this, and this about it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You're using it just as an intuition tool. Good for you. And I loved that kind of community. And I think that's the way the church should have been, was this safe community where I cheer you on and what's best for you. You cheer me on what's best for me. What we all agree is best for everyone is that loving community, loving one another, loving the earth, loving God. And we're supposed to do that alongside each other. But that's not what church has been for so many people across the country.
Because religion focuses on the afterlife, and everything that you guys have said is focusing on the present. So if you're so worried about the afterlife, then the change of seasons are just a pain in the ass. If you're being present, then you're able to see the beauty of the changes. Let me just throw out there, I hate the change of seasons. I'm a summer girl. I want it to be warm all the time. I don't get it, whatever. But I still look at the passing of time and the beauty in the death of winter, the beauty in the birth of spring. But when you're focused on morals or what you deem as to be moral, as well as the afterlife, you forget everything that's here. And you can't be present. That's why meditation would work. That's why incense would work, because it alerts your senses. But when you're trying to form a clique, when you're trying to say my way or the highway, all of that gets forgotten. I just love the rebellion of witches. That's what that would take me in, going, okay, smash the patriarchy. You guys have screwed everything up. That autonomy is empowering, and I'm sure that's why it's so feared all over the world.
Yeah, that it's the most misunderstood.
Yeah,
and it really doesn't have to be. It's we've always been in the culture. That's what's so funny to me is like, you pagan ways, things like that. We've been here, but there was this time we had to go within, and it was secret codes and blah, 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 which, was survival. Like you say, like it was a matter of survival. And witches are nothing if not survivalists. They really know how to make something out of nothing and are able to preserve themselves, their histories, their stories, their rituals, And I think that's, that can be scary because it's also very individuated. We're not all part of a congregation listening to the same person and the same Bible verses over and over, translated one way, translated another.
Misunderstood.
Yeah, that whole thing. I think it's a lot simpler to just go, okay, this is where you need to go. Listen to this guy talk about whatever. Okay, go on your way. But always think that this ominous thing is watching you, and you must conduct yourself wisely or appropriately according to whatever they say.
Yeah. The abusive guy in the sky.
I think also there's something about this idea of, I think in the church, I always thought that learning was valued. And because I grew up in a tradition where knowing your Bible was a big deal. Like it was funny when I started going to different denominations and people were like, so much about the Bible. And I'm like, not compared to where I came from. Like, the denomination I came from, I was not one of the most knowledgeable people, but, just kind of is about context. But the denomination I came from is just really big on Bible knowledge. And so I kind of had this assumption that the church, or at least the church that I came from, really values learning. And when I realized, especially the further I kind of pulled out, and now with kind of an outside perspective, is the church at large and in general, I'm stereotyping here,
of course,
but does not value learning.
No.
They value teaching, teaching you,
instructing,
indoctrination.
Yep. And they don't value learning. They don't value, I think what I realize is and people always ask me, especially as I got into social activism, like, how in the world did you come from Christianity into this? And I was like, people's stories changed my mind about things.
Yeah.
And, one of my mottos that I say all the time is knowing a person's story changes everything. And that's learning, right? Is when we share our stories. I'm not trying to teach you something through my story necessarily. I'm just sharing my story. If you learn something from that, great. Or if it's just you being supportive of me by listening, great. That's okay. And there's value in us sharing our stories, whether I adopt your story or not.
That's why I do this show. I learn something every single week,
and
that I didn't know, that I didn't comprehend. Yeah, it's let's do this. Let's make.
But what I found was the more stories I heard about anything, pick a topic or any topic, all of them. The more stories I hear, even if I don't adopt your perspective, it broadens my knowledge and my understanding, my perspective, and it deepens my compassion. And to me, that should be the highest goal of the Christian, is to deepen their compassion, to deepen their love for others. And therefore they should desperately want to hear other people's stories and learn.
No,
they don't want to learn from others. They want to teach them. I think that that's a little backwards.
Yeah.
I think I've heard this recently. So talking again of synchronicities and such, when it comes to mythology and things like that, when regards to Christianity, and it's been a while since I've been in a church. So, but Christianity as it is, evangelical and otherwise, it's very much the one lone good man kind of vibe. With we have this singular person who had this miraculous life. And I think if we can understand how traditional myths were back in the day, like the big epic poems, Greek and otherwise, there were stories interweaved. It wasn't just an A to B, one person talking, one pastor talking, giving his account and all that. We have this beautiful, rich fabric around us of people. And we just need to weave it and enrich everything, not just it be like one lone man, Braveheart, Napoleon, whatever you want to say.
Always a
Jesus
man.
Christ himself. Yeah, the one lone good man theory.
Yeah.
When we have that, and we don't have to have that. We can enrich everything and connect everything so you can find yourself in the story. So
Yes.
you can find your whoever in your story. That's the problem with a lot of major religions. Like,
Yep.
Jesus can only be one way.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. Like, why would we pick the singular if it's supposed to be?
And there's nothing singular in this entire universe. Nothing singular.
I mean, the idea of singularity or a one way is ironically totally antithetical to everything I see in creation. And if you believe God is creator, it's antithetical to the way of God.
Yeah.
Right. And we're always like stuck in like a binary duality thing.
Yeah.
We know nature is not binary.
Nope.
It is not dual. It is not a dual thing. It's not an either or. Sometimes it is both. Sometimes it is all.
I'm big on the both and, because I believe God, whether you think of God, source, universe, however you think of it, nature is both and. It is not either or.
Yeah.
And I think this, again, kind of go to the idea of good and evil and light and dark, masculine, feminine. It's both and, not either or.
Well, one of the beauties that I'm seeing,
witchery.
One of the beauties that I'm seeing here is that religion tells you not to trust yourself. And witchcraft is saying, trust yourself.
Yes, that was a big draw for me too.
Yeah. I mean, so when, you have this doctrine of, don't meditate because you can't listen or open your mind in any way, shape, or form because of that incense. But, if you have that ownership, if you have that beauty to say, okay, look, I can screw up, but I can also do better. I can, learn and do these things. And once I was able to trust myself, I still don't know that I do it completely, because that's just me. But once I started saying, okay, you can do this, things started opening up. When I was afraid and saying, well, what if God is going to punish me instead of reward me? All of those things, that's what happened. I was punished. I lost things. But when I changed my view of life, just like Wayne Dyer says, everything changed. So when we get the power within ourselves to say that we are God incarnate also, we're labeled a witch.
And I think that's actually a lot of the work I do with my clients is, how do I learn how to listen to my intuition? How do I learn to trust myself? How do I figure out how to make decisions without the church telling me what to do? These are horribly difficult things to figure out coming from such a high control religion, if that's been what you've been in. And, but it's also so freeing. I have loved the experience of learning to trust myself, and it has not always been easy.
No,
it has felt empowering little by little. Sometimes there's been guilt or second guessing that's also gone with that feeling of empowerment. But, the further along I go, the more empowerment and the less guilt and or second guessing I have. And, we talk about like the fruit of the spirit being signs that you have the Holy Spirit, right, in the church. And I think about my level of patience now, because I have the ability. Meditation is huge in helping me stay in the present moment, to know how to regulate my emotions, which affects my patience with my children, and in beautiful ways. And the peace I feel, because I'm not afraid of all the little things, the peace I feel, this peace passes understanding. And all of these different kinds of fruit of the spirit, those kind of virtues we talk about in Christianity, I experience them to such a higher degree with, I don't want to say no effort, but I'm not trying to have this fruit of the spirit.
Because you're being present.
Right. I'm pursuing a life and a spiritual practice that is good and healthy and whole for me. And those are byproducts, much the way the Bible says it's supposed to be. And what I found was that from my heritage is Christianity. That's where I came from. And And I have found that so many of the teachings of Jesus really are compatible with everything I've learned outside of Christianity. Almost kind of like maybe he was a wise teacher who knew a lot about humanity and psychology and science that the people then didn't know.
Yeah, because he studied with the
Maybe
Buddhist
he just
Hindus.
had this, a lot of wisdom.
Yeah.
Whether that's, and some people aren't going to believe in Jesus as a God figure or, as part God, and that's fine. That's something that I'm still able to believe in because it works for me. And that's been my personal experience with him. But I just think, wow, it's amazing how the Bible talks about all these different things. And I go, wow, that jives with science, and that jives with psychology, and that jives with how we know the human brain is wired. And
but not when you're in religion. They just negate all that. One of my favorite,
that when I was in religion, I didn't pursue any of those things. Yeah. I didn't experience any of those things. And now I experience them because I'm not trying so hard I'm not trying to not disappoint a God.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to connect with myself, my world, my neighbor, and my God.
I love that. One of my favorite lines in a song is from Andy Grammer, and he says, "I'm learning how to eat the fruit that's in season." And that just changed me. It was like, okay, again, come to the present. Look at what you have as opposed to what you don't have. Look at the nourishment that is provided to you as opposed to what you want. And I think that really ties into this whole conversation. Right, Kim?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I know that, like, when you spoke about, building your intuition and having a hard time, like, building trust.
Yeah.
And I know we've talked about a lot of things, but I have ADHD, so I get a bit.
All of us.
Yeah. So sometimes, like, it takes me a minute to get to my point.
Yeah.
But just like when I was like, I think the thing is like we're saying, like, what witchcraft has given to us, what this craft and this path has given to us, we've been able to play and discover this,
Yeah.
Like we talk about the light and the dark. Well, we know as witches, potential is found in the dark.
Yes.
It's the womb. It's where the babies grow. It's the darkness. It's the unknown, but it's also the beautiful. This is the time when fabrics are weaved. Yeah, like this.
It's where all the nutrients are.
Exactly. Like that dark
that's
time
cool.
is essential.
Yeah.
And I think you have to kind of be in the dark for a bit and be in that sort of, I don't know, being cast out a little bit to understand your potential with what is in you, that sky daddy way up there, what about you here on this earth? Like, what is this intuitive voice saying to you? What are your ancestors saying to you? What is God or spirit saying to you? Like, once you kind of figure out that you can kind of check yourself and go, like, for me, my intuitions, I get the tingles, like I'm getting it now, but like, it's like, okay, well, my intuition is working, but other people, it's like gut checks, it's headaches or whatever. And like, it's kind of like Hansel and Gretel, like you got to go one breadcrumb of trust and then the next breadcrumb of trust. But it is like a rehabilitation thing. Absolutely. I wasn't even deep within the church. It was just me being ADHD, disabled and weird, kind of just kept me going within. And so, it took that sort of spark to go, I can do this however I want.
Right.
And I can just keep going. And I think with witchcraft, we talked about labels, like that's the beauty of it. You can call yourself whatever you want. Like I said, I've called myself a witch for years. Now I'm not so sure, but do I still practice magic and intuition and talk to spirits? Yes. You can build it and create it however you want instead of just listening to some guy dictate to you what you should do, but not with your potential, not with your development, your own gifts,
Some of my biggest regrets are when I didn't listen to myself, when I doubted myself, when I thought that the signals, that the pit in my stomach was my trauma instead of intuition. It was my fears, my issues, as opposed to a huge warning sign. Don't make this mistake, all of those things. And that causes doubt, and that causes me to not trust myself more, when in fact it should say, no, trust yourself more. You were right. You just didn't listen.
Yeah.
And in honoring myself, in honoring those things, you kind of have to. You have to say, okay, even if I'm wrong, I'm going to trust myself on this point, because this is what feels. I was thinking about it the other day. Every time I went to my ex-boyfriend's business, I would literally get a pit in my stomach. I would start to shake. Again, I thought it was trauma. Now I look at it as wasting 6 years of my life. So, but if I had trusted myself, if I had honored myself, I would have said, this is something that I shouldn't be getting into. But I was told not to my entire life. So how do you reclaim that power when there is so much doubt? I love your response, Kim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that Kim had actually kind of already talked about this. You had talked about how it's a practice, right? You have to practice it.
Yeah.
And I think you start small. You start small, where it's small things like, I need to make this a small decision, not like a big life-changing decision, but a small decision. And I think that, in my experience, the universe honors us kind of this kind of, we would say in Christianity, is kind of a stepping out on faith, right? Of saying, I want to learn how to do this. Universe, guide me. Universe, help me. And this idea of saying, okay, I'm going to make a decision about this very small thing, and I'm going to see how it goes. Should I have this conversation with my best friend tonight or tomorrow night? What does my gut say? I think there's also
little steps like that is what you're talking about.
I think this is one of the places where divination, divination tools like tarot come into play, because they can help you work through listening to your intuition. And it's like what Kim said, you have to learn, what does it feel like to me? What does my intuition sound like to me? And it's going to feel and or sound, or the experience of listening to your intuition and hearing it clearly is going to be different for everyone. And I think this kind of goes into whether are you clairvoyant or clairaudient or whatever. And for me, it's always just been, I have a knowing. I just know. I don't get a feeling. I don't hear anything. I don't physically feel anything. I don't emotionally feel anything, which kind of stinks, because it's really hard to just go, well, I just know. But I don't. But yes, I am.
You do know what level of trust you have to have in yourself too.
It has been really hard for me to develop it, because I have to trust that when I know, I know. And I don't get a signal, like a tingling. I don't get a signal. I have a friend who he'll see colors when he's on the right path. And I'm like, I envy that in a lot of ways. But regardless of what it is for you, you have to learn how to recognize it. And I think there's tools, there's, practices you can do and things like that. But ultimately, it's just one step at a time, being willing to make a decision, trust yourself, and to even fail and try to do trial and error. And to recognize that when you fail, you're not disappointing anyone. You're not angering God. And that, from the perspective of, kind of a witch or pagan spirituality, the universe is on our side. It's rooting for us. It's saying, oh, good job. Like it actually is like the parent that when the first little toddler starts taking their steps, the parent's like, okay, I'm going to let you, fall if you need to and everything, but I'm here to root you on and, to clear the obstructions out of your way. And it's okay if you fall, I'll just help pick you back up. Or, like I would do with my toddlers when they got a little bit bigger, was, you're fine. You can get up on your own. And you
don't learn unless you fail.
Think too,
you don't learn.
I think too is I think we have to, there are a lot of times in our lives as women, as people, we get distracted. I know with practicing the craft, it made me designate time to this. And so if anything, it helped me learn to say no to a lot of things.
Boundaries.
Set boundaries clearly. Like, do not bother me. I'm doing a ritual right now. Or, hey, I'm going to go hang out with my witch friends for a night. Kids, you're on your own, like setting boundaries. And also, when you learn to trust yourself, that people pleasing aspect that we all have that rears its ugly head many a times for all of us goes a bit quieter.
Yeah.
Because you're like, you know what? This feels good to me.
Yeah.
This is my greedy
face
time.
it. Because again, witchcraft is so demonized that there are people who are going to walk away from your life or disparage you when they find out.
Yeah.
And there's still people in my life who maybe suspect, but would never know that I use the word witch to describe myself, even though I publicly say so in, guest talks and workshops all the time. And that's okay. They'll figure it out eventually. But I know that there may be a cost when that happens. But you're right.
Too, is like, and this sounds way more dramatic than it actually is, but like, and we just to reinforce that, like, witches walk outside of society's norms anyway. Yeah. So I don't have to attend your party. I don't care, I don't have to submit to you because I know myself.
Fit in.
Your energy. If you're an energy worker, a witch of any type, when your energy is depleted, and the only person that can fill your cup is yourself. I'm taking a bath. I'm doing this tonight. It's a full moon. I'm always tired. You know what? I'm just going to go to bed. You're able to kind of, you're just more aware of yourself. And I don't think people or society likes that.
No,
I think also
call me. I'm psychic. I'm reading everybody's mind.
It's too hard. They don't want to do the work.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
And people don't like it when you start to set those boundaries, and people don't like it when all of a sudden I know how to take care of myself. Yeah. And I'm aware when I'm not okay. And they don't like that I take accountability and responsibility for my energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because if I do it for myself, then that means there is a potential expectation or implication that you should be taking accountability and responsibility for your energy and your behavior and your lack or boundaries or lack thereof. Right.
Right.
And people don't like that. And that's not,
witchcraft
the church does not operate with accountability, not healthy self-accountability, and the church does not operate with boundaries. And
no, so witchcraft, what you guys are telling me is that you can no longer blame Satan. You can no longer blame God. It's like I say every single week, the onus is on us.
Exactly. You can't blame it on that guy or that thing. You just,
there's no scapegoats. There's no scapegoats. It's owning your shit.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot about what is the energy I'm putting out into the world. Like if there's energy I'm receiving into my life that I don't like, I start looking at myself and going, what is the energy I'm putting out into the world?
Yeah.
That's me taking responsibility, not going, oh, well, circumstances just suck, or this is not my fault. And it's not even about fault. It's about responsibility. It's not like I'm saying, well, it's my fault that this happened because I was putting bad energy out into the world. That's not how I feel about it. No. It's just going, I feel this I'm having this experience that I'm not loving. I wonder, is there something I could do to shift this or change this? You know how I've been lately? I've been a real sourpuss about pretty much everything. And I've not been expressing gratitude in my life. And I've not been, contributing to my community. I've not been taking care of myself. All these things that are my energetic, output into the world and input into myself, if it's lacking in some way or negative, we have to be careful about, I guess, calling certain things negative because, emotions are not negative and things like that. But
anger, wrath.
Right. But I think that, if I'm focused on revenge or, disparaging people or judging people and things like that, that energy comes back into my life, if that's what I'm putting out there. And so I've learned to kind of pay, not to take fault for it so much, but to take responsibility and go, I can change this.
Yeah.
And I have the ability to say, I've not been putting out a lot of gratitude and I'm not receiving a lot either. Wonder if these things are connected. Maybe if I start practicing more gratitude, that will come back into my life. And it does.
Yeah. It comes to me in my health. When I am not level, when I'm not doing, particularly anger for me, I don't feel good. I get injured. Literally a stub of the toe, I was told years ago, could be an awakening. And if that happens, it's like, okay, you know, son of a bitch, my attitude is furthered until I go, okay, I probably stubbed my toe because I'm racing around because I'm totally pissed off about everything that's going on right now. Let me take a big deep breath. And then it doesn't happen again. It's really just switching that energy up to start attracting the better things.
But also like giving yourself a break or giving yourself grace, however you want to say it. Because like say you are having an off day and you do go to the grocery store and that person that just slid into your parking spot took it and you want to give them the bird, it doesn't make you a bad person. Like you can just be like, oh, that was bad form. Sorry,
I had a bad day.
But you're not like this horrible, debilitating human where you have to be flaying yourself with guilt of, oh my gosh, I need to think good thoughts only. That was unchristian. Like you can just go, I had a shit day.
It's reality.
Start over tomorrow.
Reality. Yeah. I mean,
well, and that's actually my divorce is what taught me that. Going through my divorce and recognizing my responsibility in it helped me to kind of, but to not blame myself so much. So I recognized I had responsibility in it, but it was so hard because I think I was so inclined to take all the responsibility initially. And I think
women usually tend to do that.
There's also a lot of other people placing all the responsibility on me. That was part of it. And so finally just kind of coming to this point where I'm going, I am responsible for a lot of what happened here, but I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
And this is not all on me. And to give myself the grace of going, you should have done better here. And I want you to do better in the future.
And that's all it is, right?
I'm human and I'm not the only one. And there were other things happening in my life that made it really hard for me to live in a better, like to behave in a better way. And I need to have grace the same way I would for my children or any other human being that I care about.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of it. It was just learning how to have compassion and grace for myself. And, you know, like we're talking about emotions aren't negative. There'd be times where I'd be like, I hate so-and-so. Well, you know, as a Christian, that's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to hell. Right. But when I started kind of following a new path, it became, I'm allowed to feel this way. And, you know,
honor the
if
emotions.
I embrace it and just go, I'm allowed to feel this way and I'm allowed to have grace for myself because I feel this way. You know, that emotion passes so much softer and easier and quicker.
Cord cutting.
Oh, I love ritual. It is absolutely. It was the very first spell I ever did was a cord cutting, and it is absolutely my favorite go-to.
Okay, so we have literally consumed this whole hour, and there's so much more I want to ask, but let's go real quickly into spells. They're automatically, of course, demonized. They're automatically said that's for the bad. What can you tell me really briefly about spells and how you incorporate them in your life? Kim, let's go you first.
Okay. Spells are beautiful because I don't know, like I said, I'm a reader. So language is important to me. Lost languages, syntax, you know, books, bibliographies, all of that stuff is good. Spells it's just literally magical language. And you know, you just speak with intention. You can do it in a charm. I do a lot of like old school, like Scottish folklore kind of, they're called rands and they're specific spells you say. And they're like that and they're great. And, you know, it's magical language.
So isn't it just another way of saying prayer?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so. I equate it very much to prayer. That our words matter. There's power. I was actually a linguistics major. So reading and words are like, and especially the history of words and, you know, like you said, syntax and the way we put words together is like, and how different languages are connected. And I love it too. I've always kind of thought that there's power in the things we say. There's power in things that we don't say. There's a reason why we have songs and poetry and stories. They're all powerful. And so, yeah, spells are just another version of how we use our words. They're a tool to me. I think about everything kind of as a focus point, like a way to focus and or magnify my energy and my intention. And so, you know, some witches love to use crystals. I love crystals. I have a real problem with the pretty rocks. You know, some love herbs and plants and things like that. You were talking about how you're, you know, a little plant witchy over here and, you know, green witch. And I am not, I would love to be, I'm just not good at it. And so, you know, but you know, using those things to kind of focus your intentions, whether you use it in a spell or you just surround yourself with them, whatever, all of these things. And again, everyone's going to be drawn to different things. Some people are going to be drawn more to words. Some people are drawn more to crystals. Some people are drawn more to plants or more to, name any number of things that you could be drawn more to. And some of us like a combination of them. And that's, I love the beauty of being the way that spell work and magic allows for that flexibility for the individual. And so clearly you're very passionate about words. I would say mine's more of a combination of, I really like doing, like, for me, it's ritual, I guess. The words matter. I always include words and chants or poetry in my rituals, but I've always loved ritual, like rhythms. And I think that's what I loved about church. I loved when I discovered the Catholic Church and how they have much more ritual and rhythm and like the church calendar than I grew up with. It's one of the reasons I love the Sabbats. You know, tonight is Samhain, and it's a holy Sabbat to, you know, most witches. And I love, you know, like observing the seasons. So ritual and rhythms and words are part of that for me.
Well, fantastic. We are already way over. So thank you both so much. I, again, learned so many things, and I loved this show. This is just so cool, and really taking away all of the bullshit that we hear from out there. So thank you so much for being on. Danae, where can people find you, and what are your final words?
You can find me on Instagram right now. My handle is at d.constructionist. And that's where I post most often. I do also actually have a personal, where I guess I probably do more of my, like, the witchier side of myself, which is just at Danae Castile. But you can find everything through at d.constructionist, including me personally. And my final words are that, one, blessed Samhain to everyone who's observing this Sabbat. But I guess to kind of wrap up is that whatever serves you in your spiritual path, whatever helps you move more towards spiritual health and wholeness, follow that. And if that is a path of the witch, follow it without fear. And if Christianity provides that for you, follow it without fear. And, you know, if Buddhism or nothing, whatever serves you to help you become more spiritually healthy and whole, follow that.
Love it. Thank you so much. Kimberly?
Yes, I am on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. Blue Stocking Broad is my handle on all of them. Blue Stocking, because I'm a girl that reads, so it's a historical term, and I am a broad, so that's why. Just talk about what I want, and that's where you can find me. As far as final words, I would have to say, as a passionate lover of history, that if you want to understand the world today and the dumpster fire that it is, so, you know, you can find that in the past. I think we've severed those cords, and it's destructive. And I just urge people, if they want to actually know more about the present and the future, there's a pattern of it. Just look back into the past. Patterns matter, and we can change it, but always looking at the source of things helps. So
I agree.
Yep.
I love it. Thank you so much, ladies. I'm going to send you backstage and close the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another great show. I love learning things. Few comments. Your word is your wand is something that I say all the time. And not until this show did I even think of it being a little witchy. But it is, right? You create your own world. You create your own energy. So use that wand for good and embrace the darkness. It's where we rest. It's where we grow. It's where the soil starts. Don't be afraid of it like everyone wants you to be. Witches are just strong women. And if they believe something more loving than you, then question your own beliefs. Okay. So next week, we are going to be talking with Keith Giles' son, David Giles, about his new book. And I was supposed to bring it here and I forgot it. Well, you'll see me on Tuesday with him. Thank you so much. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, share it with your friends, make comments. I will be checking on that. And no matter what, remember, walk in love. Mwah! See you next week. Bye-bye.